My Life in Letters, we're back. Let's do this thing on the phone today. We're honored, man, blessed, and I feel happy, dude. I've been buzzing for the past couple days knowing that we were going to get you on the podcast. Wane from FBA, TC5, COD, and FC. Great to have you on the podcast, Wane. Thanks.
Thanks, Adam. Just happy to be here. It's an honor to just be talking with you about letters. It's great that finally people are doing just talking about in depth about letters and how it's affect our lives. So I'm psyched.
And great, and I'm psyched too. And they do affect our lives. It's like we can't get away from it, especially in New York. We're just like saturated by advertisements. I think even with our sort of disposable instant culture, I actually think people are reading more than ever in different ways, or they're listening to books, listening to audio podcasts. So I think letters are actually more necessary than ever right now. And so so I'm just psyched that you're psyched.
No doubt.
Yeah, and we were talking before the podcast about this experience that you may have had early on and that we all have, and it's always going to be different, about letter, like when it touched you, when you saw some power in it. Can you talk to us about your earliest memory about letters?
Yeah, my earliest memory about letters, I would say, is for me it was through graffiti, but for a long time, even after graffiti, is everything. Everything we look at, it's just a way of life. But I would say, for me, it was letters because, and it was graffiti through subway graffiti because, when my mom brought us to America, meaning me and my brother, in like maybe 77, 78.
And if I got my numbers right, you were born in London in 70 and moved to New York in 77. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. I was born in London, and then I came to the U.S. in 77 through Grenada. My parents is from the West Indies, Grenada and Barbados. So I lived there for a little bit. Anyway, so at the age of 7, I came to New York and was kind of like dropped in the North Bronx in an area called Alton Avenue, and the thing about the 5 boroughs is that people, if you've been to New York or New York at all, I didn't realize this as a kid, but as I got older, I realized that it was great to be like in the outer boroughs because in a lot of the certain sections of the outer boroughs, the train is elevated, means it rides above the rails, above the street, the tracks. Whereas, like, if you grew up in Washington Heights or certain places in the city of Manhattan, you had to go underground to view the trains.
Right.
So, as a kid being 7 and just barely being allowed outside, just to play games or whatever with other kids, I was able to look out my window at times when I wasn't outside, and what was there? The train. The train was just rolling by. So I would spend endless hours staring at the train because of graffiti, because of letters, and I quickly I grew to love it. Didn't really understand it, and
I'm curious though. Then can I ask you, Wane, like what was it about it that you loved? Like, and I know it's hard to pull back sometimes to age 7 and really recall things, but do you have an idea about what it was that you loved about it?
Yeah, I mean, the early, I would say, like you said, it was like right away. So, 77, 78, I would say what it was that, to me, the city, or just a lot of cities, and still people can relate to this, is gray, and when you have color, it just stands out, so everything seemed to be dull and boring, and then here comes this flash of color. That's what I remember, flash of color rolling by, and as I kept looking at it, and then eventually going to school and playing with other kids, again, there was that flash of color rolling by. And I remember, the earliest as, when I finally got to 4th grade or whatever, kids going, in the schoolyard going, yo, that's graffiti, guys are getting up, they're bombing, they're tagging, and I was like, oh, okay. That's what it is. Also the schoolyard where we played, which is PS 96 for everybody that remembers, being uptown. Like that whole entire school, it was like a courtyard, and the walls was massive, and they were all pieced up. And they were pieced up by guys like, Diane, Rolio, which a lot of people are like, who the hell's that? These guys were neighborhood guys, but they also painted a lot of trains. And in subway art, there's a Rolio dying car at 180th Street. You see it, right? Also, guys like, there was a guy, Sash, who rode on the trains, and Ceesh, and there was a crew, that lived right there in that block that wrote a lot in that schoolyard. They were called TCB, Total Control Bombers. And like I said, Rolio had his crew, the Crazy Shit, which also one of his earlier partners was Kempt. Which most people don't know, but Kempt was known for block letter styles on the trains, as well as but he could draw anything. And his most famous, I would say, people could go back to it. Most famous piece would be like in I believe it was Move the Crowd. I don't know, Rakim. He's standing, and they're filming him in Harlem.
Oh,
and
in the
behind
video
him is
for Move the Crowd?
Yeah.
Okay.
The piece behind it with the characters, with the gold chains and the letters, was done by Kemp, TCS. Dope. Recently, somebody asked me, they were like, "Oh, I think you might know this." I was like, "Yeah, this guy Kemp." And he rolled with Rolio. He was super talented, and but through the streets and drugs and so forth, things happened, and
of course,
people lost who he was and where he is, and he's still around today.
And I imagine there's a
things.
whole lot of great artists that just got kind of swallowed up by the scene, swallowed up by their lives. I want to go back a little bit.
Sorry about that.
No, you're
carry on.
That was great, and we're gonna go right back to that. But I'm curious about London in 70 to 77. I know you're a little boy. Had you spotted any kind of graffiti in London, even if it was just like punk rock, any kind of tag?
No, because the thing is, I was only in London from 1 to 3.
Oh, I see. You went to Grenada then.
Yeah, I can't remember any of it at all.
Gotcha, of course.
Unfortunately, sorry for all my London heads. But no, it was 1 to 3 there, and then what happened is from I guess 3 to 7, I was on an island called Grenada. So all I know was like beaches and like coconut trees and so forth. Not to be stereotypical, but like
but that is that's your experience, and that's
chickens in the backyard,
right?
And pigs. I mean, hey, look, I tell people all the time. I said, sometimes like one time. I remember we did a first panel speaking at UCLA. It was on Graph in 1998. And, people came up after, "Hey, Wayne, thanks. Yeah, it was really good." And I was like, "Hey, just speaking from experience, I'm just going to tell it as it is. I'm not going to make it up.
Right.
And I'm not going to exaggerate it." And that's why I'm happy to be here doing
exactly.
My Life in Letters.
And that's what we try to do. That's right.
Yeah. So no, there to get to your answer. No, I didn't see anything, unfortunately.
Okay, well, that's okay. And then, you also had said that when you saw that first train out your window, that there was that flash of color, but you also said that you didn't understand it. And I'm curious about that. Like, what might have been your understanding of what that could have been, all that flash of color? And
no, you know what? I as a kid, it was, remembering just, going back, it was just, like, oh wow, something was there, but it was, at the time, it was cryptic. I couldn't decipher it, So, and then after a while, right, because of the neighborhood and playing with other kids and their older brothers rode or whatever, I began to figure out what it was, and then you started seeing certain names and learning, and learning who they are, from being in an environment, and early names, like I said, like, Rolio, Diane, guys around the neighborhood. This guy used to write Too Cool, and there's another guy who wrote Bust. And then there was like a lot of the so-called TC5 guys, not the Blade era. I mean, Blade had tons of stuff on the trains.
Right.
The actual car with the legs, with the legs, letters with the legs. I saw that run that was some of the first cars I saw run.
Wow, nice.
You saw also a lot of NPC cars, NPC riders, guys like Rush and Rook and Caban, Cap. You saw a lot of that because, I'm in the North Bronx and the subways. You saw a lot of other stuff. So Min was one of my favorites that I was first able to read. Min, you saw guys like Spin, because their names it just kind of registered quicker because I think they were, not recollecting back. It was simple.
More legible, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Also block letters, like I said, Kemp. You also saw from Brooklyn Web 1, Web TC5, you saw him. One time I saw a block letter from him that was a block letter, half a car. It was an end-to-end car, was, I believe, a Weber hash. And those was Brooklyn guys, and you saw that. And I mean, incredible. And you just couldn't understand how the hell did they do it?
Right.
Like there was no way to decipher how they did it. Like, what is that? Like, but wow, that's incredible.
Yeah. And so, were you like an artistic kid at 7 and 8? Were you drawing? Were you?
Yeah. Yeah. I was kind of just looking at like cartoons and trying to Saturday morning cartoons and trying to draw, your basic, your Snoopy and your Mickey Mouse and early things of that nature. Yeah. So, and was it also,
were you encouraged to make art in the home? Was that something your family was into?
No, not at all. Not at all. My mom was, she was a registered nurse and she's, a realistic type of mom, like, hey, do your homework,
sure.
That you're not, art's not gonna, you're not gonna make a living off of art. You know what I mean? Like, till this day, she's still talking like that. You know what I mean? Like, but yeah, my dad at the time when he was still with my mom, he was like a welder or whatever. So no, they had no, they didn't care about art and they, never.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah. So go on.
Well, I'm just also interested in your experience of New York. So I know you're 7, so you're being controlled quite a bit. You can't go out a lot, but you did get to look out your window. What were some other impressions of New York City as like you were an immigrant. So what was that immigrant experience for you when you first got here?
I would say, it was like wow, because at the time, I spoke with what people call like broken English,
right?
Because like here's this like I had like kind of like a part English accent, proper English accent, mixed with like
island sounds,
island, like like kind of an island vibe, like how people speak. So people were just like, what? And then like here in America and in New York, people were very plus I was very kind of shy. Where people were very like aggressive and outgoing. One of the things, that I noticed, there was like these guys on the block. They lived in a house on Allenton Avenue. I can't remember the block. I don't know if it was Bonds or whatever. But they were like biker dudes. Like basically they had like denim jackets, ripped bikes and so like the thing about the North Bronx and Allenton Avenue, it was kind of a melting pot. Like it was at that time there was a lot of Jewish people there in the building I live in, and then down the block, a lot of Puerto Ricans, and also the neighborhood was also very Italians at the time. And then there was a whole area, you went into Pelham Parkway that was like Yugoslavian, like, so, the area is very like, mixed or whatever. But anyway, these bikers was like mostly Italian, maybe Irish. So it was crazy. And these guys, you could tell they were crazy, and they were, at the 4th of July, they'd be like, they'd come out with like, like a truckload of fireworks, lighting M80s, and they just wild out kind of guys, and they would come around to the kids and be like, hey, hey, light it, come over here, like it's kind of wild, but like really a good experience, because you learn how to deal with like all sorts of different people.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, was there like I mean, I'm wondering if that biker group was a gang, and then that my next thought was there a heavy gang presence in the North Bronx in 77, 78 when you first came?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say that. I don't think there was like a heavy. I wouldn't say there was a gang. I don't know how deep they were. I mean, they just had the jackets and everything. And
Okay.
I forgot the name of them. Also how it relates to graffiti and to letters is like there was these guys. I don't know who did the piece, but there was on Allerton Avenue and Olinville on the corner. The store is still there. It was called Zinnemann's at the time, which was owned by some Jewish guys. That was owned by some Arabic guys. They bought it in the 80s. But in the late 70s, early 80s, Zinnemann's, the corner store, there was graffiti on the wall, which I remember was the name of the biker crew or gang
really?
or whatever. I don't want to say they were a gang because I never really seen them do anything in negative, but they definitely had the jackets and the bikes, and people knew not to fuck with them. But yeah, their piece, their whole name was on that wall.
What was the style of that piece? What would you equate it to?
I would say like it was reminiscing of very like old 70s, very like
rock and roll band kind of stuff, or
kind of like that, but kind of like I would say early pioneer looking type of styles, something like that with definitely kind of a rock punk kind of vibe.
Okay.
I remember it, very primary colors, and then I forgot who someone painted, someone there was a piece after that, like more up to date or whatever afterwards at some point.
Nice.
But yeah.
So I want to go to your, because you had said on PS 96 that it was like it was really painted, and also that you had said in 1980. No, actually, you said in fourth grade when you were 10, which I'm just kind of equating that to 1980.
Right.
You said that some kids told you what it was. They said, "Yo, that's bombing. That's graffiti." Do you remember that experience? And can you tell us about it? Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that like it was yesterday. So, I think, in elementary school, basically how it worked was in PS 96, like at a certain point of the day or whatever, you would have like, an art hour or, drawing hour or whatever. And I don't know if it was him or me. I think it was him. He was drawing like the so-called S. I remember the letter. I don't remember all the letters, but I remember he was doing this S that people still do to this day. It's kind of like the top of the S is kind of like a mountain. It's very simple, kind of like a throw up, and the top's like a mountain. And then you could basically make an S with about 9 lines. I would have to draw it, and we did it, and you'd be like, oh yeah, everybody would know what I'm talking about.
We know exactly what you're talking about,
right?
With the sharp pointy tops and bottoms.
Yeah, and I was like, oh wow, that's hey, that's crazy, man. Oh, that reminds me of like what we see in the schoolyard. And he was like, oh yeah, graffiti, and yeah, he was talking about it, and oh yeah, on the trains, yeah, this guy's getting up, and I was like, oh wow, but of course back then I wasn't saying wow. I might have been like, oh, fresh,
Mm-hmm.
And he I was like, oh, you know a lot, and he was like, yeah, my older brother. He said his older brother writes Root, Rute. Now, people can remember back. I don't know how known he was, but he wrote with Diane and he wrote with Rolio, and he was more of a bomber. This guy. Well, his younger brother was in my 4th grade class. He's my brother Root, and this is how you do a throw up, and throw up. You just do it quick, and he, he knew a lot because he was a Puerto Rican kid, and what happened was. I think he used to hang out with his older brothers and friends, because he just had an insight that no one else had. And, so I'd hang out with him, in school time and I'd start doing, doodling, start like trying to do my name or whatever on paper, I remember that as early as that.
So that would have been 1980. You started maybe putting letters on paper?
Yeah, on paper. Just, nothing serious. Just, trying to copy what we saw in the schoolyard, or like we used to look out of a certain class and see the trains and talk about it, and trying to copy it. Just, straight out, like, we were biting, like, oh my God, look, and anyway, so that was I would say would be the first contact
Yeah.
with someone that actually, was in that world,
And did that kid,
like,
did Root's younger brother, did he did he write as well?
yeah, I think so, of a neighborhood kid, but never really remember him. So he had another brother which was a little bit older, which I remember, like, they moved out of the neighborhood like shortly after that. Okay. And then, like, some years later, which was like 1985 or winter of '86, I remember I was in the one tunnel, 145th, and I'm in there painting with my original partner, this guy Debs, who lived on top of me. He was a Jamaican kid that I hated, and we became cool. And we wrote. And then another guy, Avon TC5, who was a little older, and was like, he was the first guy that brought me to Pearl Paint and took me to the Henry Chalfont studio. Anyway, so we're in 145th, which is the one tunnel between 145th and 137 on Broadway, which is a very dangerous place at this time. You couldn't go in there if you didn't know anyone. So we're in there painting, whatever. And here comes these kids down the tunnel through 137. We could tell, oh yeah, they're writers. They come in, and I looked. Oh shit! It's this kid I remember being the older brother of this guy, like not the oldest brother, Root, but like the guy in the middle. And I remember him. Oh shit! What up, man? I seen you in, back then, I ain't seen you in years.
Yeah.
Like, oh my, like forever. And it was like maybe 4 years or 5 years, but like back then that was like a lifetime.
Yeah.
So I said, yo, first thing I told him, because I didn't know. I was like, yo, who? The first thing, I knew where I was and what was going on there. Every minute I saw, a lot of violence going on down there, and I was like, hey, who do you know down here? And his boy, who I didn't know who he was, just started mouthing off like, we're doing our thing. We don't need to know anybody. So I kind of went closer to the guy I knew. Like, I feel like I knew him because I knew his brother or whatever. And I said, hey, listen, if you're down here, you want to know people. Like, I'm telling you, like, be careful down here, And then I was just like, all right, let me keep working on my panel. Next thing you know, 10 minutes later, they walked into this car where at the time, FC had taken over the tunnel. The tunnel before was run by FBA and ball busters, but at that particular time, in that winter of '86, it was FC crew that ran that tunnel. Wes, Zaire, Zame, a lot of original FC guys, Risk FC, along with other guys with affiliations, John Juan, Joey TDS,
right.
The guys like that. Like, you don't want to run into these guys in the tunnel. Polk IBM, and so this, they went into a car where all these guys was hanging out. They wasn't even bombing or anything. They were just hanging out. And, hey, they pretty much got jacked for this shit and slapped up and told to, get the fuck out of here and, whatever. So anyway, it was that was a normal day in the one tunnel.
Nice. Yeah.
It's not really fun. It's a lot more crazy than it really is. But at the time, like, the thing about graffiti, then and now is like you had to play by the rules, and you learned the hard way, for sure. And you accepted things for what it were, because that's the way. There was no changing it. Yeah, sure. Like me, I was never a violent person, but at times you had to throw your hands up, and fight if you had to, even if you had to take an L.
Yeah.
And there was times when you got robbed and you got jumped, and that's the way it was.
Of course.
Yeah. And in those days, most people, or not most people, but some people, they stopped. There were people I remember. That's it. They got robbed once, or they got punched in their face, and that was it. The game was over for them. They stopped writing, and they moved on. I love writing so much that, hey, I got to keep painting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, oh shit, I took an L or whatever, and I got robbed or beat up, and I was like, all right, well, I got to go racking again. They just stole my can, right. So I got to go racking, and I got to come back. Well, and perseverance.
Yep,
Yep.
absolutely. Perseverance. I like that. I'm gonna speaking of going back, I'm gonna go back. So you had said that in 80 you learned about what this was and you started to draw it. Through some research that we've done here at the podcast, we know that you, or at least I think we know that you did your first piece in 83.
Yep.
Is that accurate? Okay. Can you just talk a little bit about 80 to 83? Obviously, that's between you're 10 and 13. So we're all doing kid stuff. We're all just living our lives, trying to figure out who we are. How did graph fit in before that first piece in 83?
Well, what was going on was there was, I had now I'm like, let's say somewhere in between there, or should I say, I was still in like elementary school and about to go to middle school, junior high school,
Mm-hmm.
and what happened was at that particular point there was a big explosion, obviously with hip hop, where I didn't, or just music between hip hop and also freestyle music and certain clubs and things. And kids was, and also fashion, people were wearing Adidas and Kangol hats
Right.
and your Le Tigre, like kind of like your polos, tops. And, so everybody was trying to find themselves. People were into dancing. And we had a little crew around the neighborhood, which is called the Players. There was just some guys from the neighborhood and kind of like created a little breaking crew and, jackets. And I was trying to break, and spin on my back and things of that
Did you have
nature.
skills? Did you have skills?
I had no skills. What I could, what I was doing, I could spin. I could do a good back spin. I remember.
All right.
And I could kind of spin on my hands a little bit. I couldn't do a windmill, and just my shy nature. Like I said, everything in New York, especially at that time, and then just in general, New York is always aggressive. You have to. It's an aggressive city.
Yeah.
You have to be aggressive. And just being too much in my own shell and being shy. It was like, I kind of wanted to get out there and when I got out there and did a little something, but not enough for people to go, oh my, hey, you got skills, it was, for me, it was always, drawing, because, I could be in a closet, drawing,
Mm-hmm.
Always home drawing. And then like, when I first started, got a little black book or whatever, kids was like, I made it to 7th grade and, sitting at the lunch table, and kids began to be like, now we kind of feel like we know what was really like going on. We felt like we were part of it in a way, because I had my black book and I was writing in the neighborhood, and now I know guys from my age, they were going to Payne and Ready. They were going to like Dyer Avenue bombing and so forth, and and then also this one guy moved to the neighborhood. This guy Minim, who later Poem took under the wing, and I think Poem took him. And they did a couple calls or whatever, but he was better. He could paint already. He could piece, and then he also had 2 guys he wrote with, or he introduced me. And we kind of hung with. One guy wrote Rapper, right, and the other guy wrote Sir. Sir later changed his name to Save, and later on, people know him today as Pure, PFP.
Oh, sure.
Okay. Yeah, he was writing SER, and he was hanging with this guy Minim at the time, and also Repper, who later on became Bark, and these guys, they had a crew called MB Mad Bombers, and they were killing the lines of throw-ups. First as Repper, or I forgot what his initial throw-ups was, but then later on he went into Bark and some other guys, with Dex and these guys. Anyway, it's names that people don't really know about. But these guys they put in work, and then as I said, on the piecing tip, Minim stopped writing, and obviously Pure became Save on the one line, and later on a slew of other names, and today people know him as Pure around the world,
Right.
So and they know he got skills, so you can imagine the levels.
And yeah, definitely. And you had mentioned this like lunch table, like where also, so by grade school, you now have a kind of an understanding for what graph is, how people maybe are starting to do it. You have your own black book. I also think my understanding is that probably by about that time, 1982, whatever that is, the city was starting to really be vocal about how much they disliked the graph. And, I'm interested in as a kid, did you care about that? Were you just like, fuck it, I want to go all city like these dudes? Or was there any kind of trepidation or nervousness about doing it because of how the city was looking down on it?
At that time, I think how we felt, or even just to have an insight of how the city looked at it, we didn't really know how they looked at it because it was everywhere. I mean, when I say everywhere and everyone wrote with a marker, I mean, it was literally like that. Whether they were good or not, everyone had a tag and everyone was involved and everyone was so-called like street, very like everybody was into something. Whether, some kids, people trying to make their mark, and I don't mean writing. I mean more as a youth coming up in the city, or shall I say, people trying to fit in. Mm-hmm. That's the best type of word as coming into being like a young teenager or whatever. People are trying to have an identity either through fashion and doing their custom stuff they do with their clothing, or some people the way they walk, even the way they walk, and this differentiated through different boroughs, as well as some kids, they were stick up kids. That's what they did. They trade their offerings to the streets was I robbed people. Right. It was cool. I stuffed this guy up for his bike, or his jacket, or the most, you see people getting robbed for their Adidas. Shell toes at that time cost $30, which was a lot. A lot of money. And if you had a pair of shell toes on, and you didn't have any hand skills, then they were going to be somebody else's shell toes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. that was it. You know what I mean? So and then of course here comes like I said, the whole b-boy thing. People were breaking and electric boogieing, and then a lot of the in my North Bronx, a lot of the New York City breakers were, from up there. Not a lot of them, but there was a few of them from up there. So, just trying to fit in, people, my thing I felt was graffiti, because I kind of felt I knew how to draw, and it just came naturally, For me, I think things kind of snowballed. Mm-hmm. It wasn't planned, or it wasn't like, oh yeah, I'm gonna no. It kind of like, oh hey, this is something I like to do. I've been watching it for some years, and here's some younger kids that their older brother writes. I got a little insight. Now these younger kids are writing. Okay, hey, I fit in right here. Mm-hmm. And then then everything else snowballed from there.
Yeah, and then that snowball was that 83 when you were like, yo, I'm about to do this, and if so, I'm always curious about, just because I remember my own experience of trying to gather paint to do my first piece. Before your 83 piece, had you gotten your hands on some paint and tried some throwies or some fill-ins or some straight letters or something?
Maybe I think one kid had on Oliver Avenue. He had we always had markers for some reason, but then he had a can, and then we kind of like bombed on a block or whatever, and then we went to 96, and we kind of just played around with the can, like, oh wow, and then but then people started schooling me like, yo, you got to go racking. Like guys like, you gotta go racking. Racking? Yeah. What's that? It's like, yo, you can't pay for the paint, you gotta steal it. Now I'm like, oh man. Really? Like, how do you do that? And people, they kind of just show you, like, you're on the block with these kids hanging out, and they're just like, yo, you wear a big jacket, you put it down your pants, you put it down your sleeve, you could do 5 or 6 cans around your waist, or you got the right jacket. People are like, yo, if you got the military jacket, you can kind of like, and then you tuck your shirt in, and then you throw the cans in through the first rack I was doing. I remember that's like, they were like, yo, you just tuck your pants in, you tighten your belt real tight, and then you go in the store, and when no one's looking, you take the can off the shelf, you look at it like you're gonna buy it, and you kind of throw it inside your shirt.
Through the
and
neck, through the neck hole,
through the neck,
yeah,
into the collar, and then it slides down to your waist, and then you push it with your elbow around to the back. And if you can get 5 cans, you're good. If you can get 8 to 10 cans, you mastered it. Then some guys put cans down their sleeves, and other guys down their pants. There were guys that was what they mastered. Like, they might have not been good riders, but their rack skills was incredible.
Mm-hmm.
So back then, everything played a part in your mission to achieve that one piece, which was to paint your name on the subway, and which was to do style, which was to do letters.
Yeah. And who was that guy that taught you how to rack? Did you say his name was Larry?
No. I would say the first guy I went racking with, I would say, is my man Nip, who was an early COD guy. But before that, I would say there was other guys that was kind of around the way who wrote, like my man Sabar wrote Burn at the time, and there was other kids that they wrote Mick. I remember this kid Mick and Rich from the block, and they bombed on the subways, and also my man Sec, TA, and this guy Cade, not Cade TMT. These guys came a little later.
Okay.
But they had a crew TA, and they wrote, and those first guys are kind of like, yo, this is how you do it. But Nip was the first guy I went with, racking in the neighborhood.
Yeah,
we
what was
went
your
to
spot?
First spot was a Martin Paint on, you took the train to the end of the line, 241st, and you walked about maybe 3 blocks. There was a Martin Paint there. And hey, they had epoxy, Krylon, Martin Paint. Those are some of the first brands. Yeah.
And also you mentioned markers, and I kind of gloss over this in these interviews, and I think it's actually really important that we talk for a second about what kind of markers you were using when you were coming up in those 80 to 83 years. What'd you have in your pocket back then?
Oh, back then you had to have a Pilot. A Pilot would be the first marker that you buy, and then ink you'd have either Marsh or Flowmaster, and you kind of rack that from a stationery store. Stationery stores had that type of stuff. But really, what happened even in those early days, like because money was so scarce and people didn't have money at all, and we made things. So someone taught me. I can't remember who it was, and I don't want to, say one person. And somebody said, "Oh, I listened to that. It was me that, whatever." But we made markers, and we went into the store like Woolworth or whatever, and we stole, or we took our mom's roll-on deodorant thing, and then we took man roll-on. We took the top out. And then we stole eraser, like a eraser from the school, chalk from the school where teachers erased the board, and then we'd strip the eraser down, put one inside and one as a tip, and then you put your ink, and you go bombing. We'd go what we call motioning at the time with some of the same guys. Like I said, my boy Sabar, who we wrote Burn, and Mick and Rich, Minim. Those first guys are kind of like got my hands, dirty with. And we'd ride the train to 241st Street. Why? Because we are 6 stops maybe from the last stop. So 240, we are on Alton Avenue, and then we ride it northbound. And then when the train got to 238th Street, we'd either start motioning, tagging there on the train, because there were less people on the train when it got to the last stop. Also, we'd wait, and then, when you got to the last stop, you wait. The train would pull back out. You get on another train. Like when the train pulled into 241st, that train just landed on the right platform. There'd be one across the platform waiting to take off. We'd jump on that and throw tags on that going southbound, and we'd get back off Alton. That was our first subway experience of bombing. At the time they called it motioning. Now worldwide to people, a lot of that is known as, people painting on the outside of the train is known as a back jump. It's not like you really went to a layup or a yard. The train is kind of in service and kind of stop for a moment, and you hit it. I still think that's one of the best ways, even today, to hurt the system, because it's moving and they don't know when you're getting on or you're getting off, or they stop for 4 minutes. You could do a throw up and then where the hell did that happen at? It's like or like in Europe, some guys will pull the brake and other guys will jump on the other side and smash it. So. Yeah,
so that's cool. So you were making markers, like you said, Flowmaster and Marsh, but then that '83 era.
Also, let me say one thing just to pertain to that. I'm sorry. Also too, we were taking the carbon at the time when you went to school. They had these machines that would do the copies for the kids. The teachers would do it, and they would have this paper called carbon paper. And you would take that paper and put it in a jar, or you put it in like a big bottle, and you pour alcohol in it, and you would have purple ink.
Yo, and that's so wild.
Yeah, Brian, I'm going back now.
Yeah, you are. And you know what? I'm glad you brought up the carbon.
Would know what I'm talking about.
I'm glad you brought up the carbon paper because I'm just curious, since you have just like a breadth of knowledge, like who do you think came up with that? Who made that carbon paper ink first? Any idea?
No, man. I mean, you know what? That a lot of those things. I mean, I wish I did know.
Right.
I think to a lot of these things are important things to know, and this is the time to really kind of document this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I know for a fact it was like an everyday thing at that time when I got knowledge of it. It wasn't like anything special.
It wasn't secretive anymore. Everybody knew.
No, it wasn't. The thing, I mean, this is a good question. I would say one of the guys who was heavily into making markers in ink was Scene TC5. Okay, if you look at Subway art, there's like a picture there where you see the inside of the train and you see Scene. And most people might think it's the UA Scene. It was Scene TC5. You could tell by the hand style. He had a lot of insides. He wrote also a lot of different names. But when he bombed Scene. And there was also at one point, I remember asking him eventually when I met him. But I remember as a young kid, this stuck out where he had a tag that was like two colors, right? Where it looked like he took two markers and stuck them together. Let's say like red and black, and like when you tag, you would see both. The flow would be both colors.
Nice,
right?
Yeah.
You're like, oh shit, how the right? Later on, I was like, hey, how'd you do that? And I believe, from what I remember, which was maybe a decade later, when I did connect with him, he was like, oh yeah, I when they went bombing with different color inks and he made his marker, he would half the tip, they'd be in the train bombing and he would take black and put it on one side and red on one side, and then he just copped the tag, and then back then, like I said, people were like crazy, they'd go to the even Webb, they'd go to the yard or whatever with with a lot of supplies, like the jar ink, mops, everything, and they would literally like fill that shit there. The shit ran out of ink, you just refill it. I mean, that's why sometimes dudes like back then people the system really hated the insides, because some guys it was really about being destructive. They take the ink and put it all over the seats that pour. It was really like a war, us versus them. So let's move on. I don't want to.
Well, that's okay. I mean, that's
rant on about that stuff.
That's the important stuff, actually. Like that little stuff. And like, for instance, no one talked about that. No one talked about just dumping ink on the seats. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that's important.
Dudes would like they'd bomb it and let the ink drip all the way down and throw the ink on they're right on the windows.
Yeah.
Just like really going to town on this shit. Like, I don't give a fuck. And be more destructive. So I mean, also too, the more you all the headboards you hitting spot. They want to be visible.
Right.
Some guys would take 20 tags on the seat. Why? Because everywhere else, the panels and the headboards and everything was already bombed, and some of it was bombed by guys that had been around for a long time and had hand skills, and you don't want to go over that.
Right.
You just started. You're nobody.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, there's a hierarchy, and you guys know.
There's a hierarchy, and you better respect it.
Yeah,
when the shit hits the fan, nobody gonna save you.
Right. And I want to ask you, man, like, since you brought it up, like, I'm interested in this sort of notion that there was this us against them thing and that you guys were taking it out on transit. Like, the transit became, actually, you tell me, was transit a symbol of everything that might have been, I don't know, wrong with the city? Like, what was it that you guys wanted to take out so much of your aggressions on transit, and there was that us versus them vibe?
I think it wasn't so much like we were like against transit. They were just the outlet. You know what I mean? Like I think a lot of us were coming from, broken homes and just having one parent in the house, and we can get out at a young age when we're not supposed to be out, and maybe we were confused about other things, and the city didn't have much to offer, and it was a way to release that stress and that energy and that, like, I don't give a fuck, and most guys, they wasn't on trying to be creative. They were on like, I don't give a fuck.
Right.
There was guys sometimes going with us to the layups, and they kick out the windows. They had a writing name, but they were really more, some guys were more destructive, and they were there for the beats and to rob people and stuff like that. I mean, that element just existed in that time, because maybe there wasn't so many outlets for kids and things for them to do, and parents, you come from a broken home, and your parents are alcoholics or abusing drugs, and so kids were left to take care of themselves, which they didn't know how to take care of themselves. And then, you get with another kid, and, he's telling you he knows what to do, or whatever. And, everybody wants to go riding, and you're like, yeah, okay, that's cool. Fuck it, let's do it. Like, people were just down to do it. Some people weren't down to really be creative. They were down to be destructive.
And what about you? What about you at the time? Like, I mean, you mentioned in passing that, your father was around and then he wasn't. Like, did you have angst? Did you have anger that you were getting out early?
Back then I didn't really see it like that, but decades later as an adult, and just traveling the world and seeing a lot of the things I've seen traveling, and how certain families or families interact, I realized, like, wow, I didn't really come from that. Like, I came from, like, kids that came from fucked up homes, even though, like, I didn't really think it was fucked up, because my mom always provided for me and my brother, but my dad left when I was 10. But years later on, like I said, decades later on, I look back on it, reflect on it, and realize, like, damn, that shit really fucked us up. Like, that was part of the reason we were out there. Out there looking to do anything, But the good thing about it was, where most people say, oh, graffiti ruined my life. As some of us will say, graffiti really saved our lives.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because there was a lot of things, especially at that time, to do. I don't care what city you were in, whether you were in New York or Chicago or you were in California, that we could have been getting into, that a lot of our friends who didn't write ended up doing.
Yeah.
Everybody was either selling drugs, because that seemed to be the natural progression for them. There was no role models, so they seen, drug dealers as role models.
Right. Right.
Believe that.
And
that's
cash.
the truth.
Cash is a role model.
People saw, they had cars, and they had
Right.
these things, that, like, oh wow, how do you get that, or like, even later in the 90s, people saw, like, oh my God, he's got Jordans on, how do you get the Jordans? He was doing hand in hand on the block, and he was, but for me, to get back to the point of what this is about, letters and graffiti, is like, graffiti was the vehicle for me because I never really wanted to be destructive. I mean, even though I painted in some ways, and I did my thing traditionally, meaning, like, I wanted to kind of follow how all the guys I looked up to that was graffiti writers, I wanted to kind of follow in their footsteps. I knew that as a young age.
Yeah.
And I wanted, if racking is what we had to do, then racking was a part. I had to rack my cans. Why? Because I looked up to these guys, and this is what they did. This is how they did it. Okay, so I got to rack. If I got to be part of a crew, then I got to be part of a crew. you got to do as you see, because that seemed to be the normal thing. But when it came to like anything outside of graffiti, like I remember going racking with a kid one time on Long Island, and he, we racked, we went to a nice little rack or whatever, and he at the end of the rack, I guess we only went for a couple hours, whatever. We had about 60 cans or whatever. And I was like, yo, I'm straight, man. I'm going, I can't wait. We were racking in Long Island. And I was like, oh, I can't wait to get back to the Bronx because, I'm going to go painting tonight, man. I can already see what I'm going to do. I'm excited. He's like, yo, let's go to Macy's and rack some jackets. And I was like, yo, I don't steal jackets. I got a jacket on. Yeah. And he was like, what? No, he's like, yo, it's fun though. We can rack. I was like, yo. I was like, hey, listen, it's not my thing. But you could do it though. He was like, all right, well, I took 2 last week. I'll get you one. And he went into the shop. I waited in the parking lot. He came out with a triple fat goose. If anybody remembers triple fat goose.
Of course.
Came out with a triple fat goose. And he gave it to me. And it's fun. The ironic thing is, a week later, somebody tried to rob me for it on the train. Is that karma or what?
Right.
Anyway,
definitely.
Whatever.
So check it. So
yeah,
you had said that in '83 you went racking up there at Martin's up on 241st.
Martin Paint. Yeah,
Martin Paints. And so was that in preparation for for that very first piece, or were you at that point just collecting and getting ready?
No, this was just like a first attempt at racking. My man Nip, we had just kind of started hooking up, and he went to my junior high school, and then we both kind of got down with COD. But he was a little bit more advanced. He had a bunch of trains running on the line already. He had maybe about 6 or 7 trains running, and I didn't have it. I was just starting out, so he for some reason he was like, "Yo, I got a rack." So word, okay. So he takes me in, and we get off the train. He goes, "Yo, it's right there. This is what we're gonna do." And I was all right. And then we went in, and I think the first time I had a rack like 3 cans. I was scared. The fact of the matter is, you're going in the store. You're old enough to know what you're doing is wrong. But you're like, fuck, I'm here. I gotta. How am I else gonna do this thing? So you go in, and I was shitting and scared at the same time. I was able to get 3 cans. And then he might have came out with 7 cans, I think. And then, but I'm so excited and happy. And he's looking at me like, that's all you got? Holy shit. Like, you're amazing, but I'm happy because I'm like, okay, I got 3, Yep. And, then you start going in more and more. And then we started going into like areas a little above 241st led in. This is the beginning of like Mount Vernon, and we then later on we started going into New Rochelle, which is a little further up, and they had more stores, which is a little ways from the city, where so many people wasn't racking.
Okay.
So they were a little easier. So those are the first racks I hit, and then so after that I started going racking with my man Michelob, who was someone I looked up to, put me onto the wing. Okay. Before I started hanging out with Dero.
Also, I'm interested in you because you had said that you were black booking for quite a while and playing with letters. What names were you putting on paper back then when you were developing?
Yeah, it's funny, very funny. I was doing one of the first names I was doing Minnow, Mino, and
like the fish.
Well, like. If you remember the TV show, the Gilligan's Island.
Oh, the USS Minnow. Yeah.
That was the name of the boat. So I was doing that, and then I was also doing 1010, like the news show, 1010 wins. This is all real corny shit,
Yo,
right?
1010's kind of a dope tag, though. 1010's
hey, people never. It wasn't. I didn't really start writing Wayne and things like I wrote him, which would later. Came hymns, and those which was even later, till I met Blade. Somewhere in early '84, there was a place called the Pizza City on Alton Avenue near the McDonald's. McDonald's still there. One of the first places I hung out as a kid, like kind of hung out. It was kind of a hangout for kids, and somehow Blade was in there. Blade. He, I don't know how I knew he was Blade, but his girlfriend Dolores at the time. Her younger sister, we knew who they were for some reason. The kids, and I lived on the block. And then Blade, I saw him in there. Somebody was Blade, so I had my black book. I went up to him, and I was like, "Hey, can you sign my black book? You know, I'm a big fan. You know." And Blade signed the black book, and he asked me what I wrote, and I told him, you know, Minnow, and he was like, first of all, that's too close to like men.
Mm.
And then it's funny, I didn't really think of that as a kid at the time, but he was right. And even back then, forget about writing someone's name that's already known. You couldn't even write somebody's name. You couldn't even come close to a motherfucker's name. That's the level of what it was back then.
Okay.
You know, so I was like, oh shit, he's right. And I was a big fan of men, but I didn't think in the subconscious.
Yeah.
Like, holy shit. How funny is that?
Yeah.
Okay, so...
I'm sorry,
so
also, what year did you say this was that you met Blade?
It was early 84.
Okay.
So I've been writing kind of like for a year already.
Okay.
I believe it was early 84 or 83. It could have been 83 still. I recollect, you know, early 84.
Okay.
You know, but I met him, and then he signed the black book, and then he told me that, and that stuck in my head. I went home, I went to the dictionary. I think I talked to my brother about it, and my brother he's a smart guy of the family. I mean, today's a lawyer, you know. So so I said to him, I told him something. He was like, "Get a dictionary," you know. So I got a dictionary. I was looking. I couldn't find anything. And then I remember also Blade saying, but in that same breath as that name, he goes, you know, you can. He goes, if you wrote your name, your given name, that's a pass, even if someone had it. That's what he said. Okay. So I was like, okay, Wayne. And so I started going home, drawing with Wayne and looking in the dictionary for names. And I realized that that Y is a fucking eyesore, right? That shit, I can't draw a Y for shit, you know. In the fact, I couldn't draw any letters. But, you know, a Y was like, it's just killing me. So, plus, I was like, I got to be in and out. I wanted a 3-letter name. You know, guys like Min had a 3-letter name, and other guys that was killing shit. You know, or even guys like, you know, had 2-letter names. Fuck. So I said, fuck it. Take out the Y. I looked in the dictionary at the name without a Y. You could write it. There was 2 different ways, W-A-N-E, and there was also W-A-I-N. And I was messing around with both, and then I realized I like the W-A-N-E.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know, and shortly after, like I said, now it's 84, shortly after, I remember I was doing little WEs in the black book, and then Dero moved around the block, and I had a little black book, and I seen Dero, and I had a little WE in it, and I saw him, and Dero's already advanced, chilling and doing his thing, and he had trains running, and I ran up to him, you know, check it out, and he was like, it's all right, you know, when you get a chance, you know, knock on my door, I got some shit to show you, you know, that's what he said. Right, and he signed a book, and he was with another guy at the time that wrote Was or Wasser, you know. Anyway, so you know, I was practicing doing my thing, and then but the first guy that actually took me painting a train was my man Michelob. Okay, who was later on my man. He took me painting, and how I met him.
Well, and actually,
you know,
hold on, Wayne, because you know what, that's a story I want to get to, but we bypassed that 83 piece. So let's go back to 83. You mentioned Minnow, you mentioned 1010. What did you paint that first night in 83? That what you consider your first piece, and can you tell us about the mission?
Yeah, no, I you know, I painted like I believe like I painted like a 1010, and it was kind of near where this 96 school was, you know, like I filled in, it was all drippy, and then an outline, and you know, like again, you know, it was my first time. I was so scared. I was with one kid from around the block, and you know, like, you know, I did it.
Yeah.
But it was like, that looked so bad. It looked nothing like what I looked like the stuff I liked looked nothing like it, you know.
But had you been sketching out the letters? And
Yeah. Well, I had been sketching, and it also looked nothing like what was on paper.
Right.
That's what I meant to say. Like, yeah, it was just so different. I was like, oh, fuck, look at the drips. You know, like, can you fucking believe it? How the fuck do they do this shit? You know, like, you know. Anyway, so that was the first one.
And that was on PS 96.
No, it was like across the street. There was like a parking lot. There's a parking lot across the street from there of these kind of big buildings, which I believe are condos or nice apartments or whatever. And in the parking lot of that, in the back of the parking lot, there was a wall, and I believe that wall now is owned by MTA, because the way they now they're fenced up, the whole inside of that, but the back of the wall where I did that was, I believe, an MTA building. But I didn't know. I just thought it was a parking lot, it was a wall, and you can go there at night, and not too many people can see you. People could walk by and see, but not really, or whatever.
And did you go solo that night?
No, I went with a kid, like a little kid from around the block that kind of wrote. One of the player kids or whatever. We went. And hey,
crew. Okay.
Yeah. I was hanging tight with those guys.
Yeah.
And they kind of, like I said, they were doing more than motioning. They were motioning regularly, but they were also going to Dye Avenue. But I wasn't going with them.
Okay.
82, 83, they had already graduated to trains. They were painting on trains. I didn't do my first train till 84.
Yeah, and you said that Duro took you out to, that Michelob took you out to do
that. It was Michelob,
but
yeah.
So, to stay on that 83 wall, what was I know you said it was a mess. What would you even call the style? Were they block letters? Were they bubbles? What was the style?
It was something just more that kind of reflected a simple style. More like a simple style lettering, could say, that I was trying to do, but I would say it was just very stiff and,
And did it say TEN? Is that how you were writing it out?
I did TEN, and then I did the number.
Number 10.
Yeah. 10.
Yeah. And what was the paint? What was like your stash of paint that you took that night? I know you were racking it all over those cans. You remember the colors, brands?
I remember it was like silver and black or whatever, right?
Okay.
But,
you kept it simple. Nice.
But the brands was probably no-name fill brands, at that time. Like I said, like that first piece was probably no-name like brands. I can't remember what it was. The only time it wasn't until like maybe a few pieces down the lane, which was like maybe around the same time, that I ended up painting a Wane, like the first Wane piece without a Y was painted across the street on Olinville from the Zinneman School. There was a wall where you play handball on, and I did a Wane piece there, and I know I used Krylon and maybe some Rustos and mixed with some no frills. That was the first Wane piece I did, and that might have been in like I said, those brands in red, white, black, yellow. Yellow is real drippy. Might have been a school bus yellow, or no frills yellow.
Okay. And you had said, so after you did that first 10-10, between that first 10-10 piece and then meeting Blade, how much more 10-10 or minnow stuff were you doing? How many pieces do you think you got under your belt before you met up with Blade?
I think, like about 4 pieces. Not many, Yeah. I thought the neighborhood was big, and there was another block up the block from 135. There was this other block, part of Olinville, but a block closer to I can't really, only I can remember in my head. But there was another wall that was kind of bombed, and we do shit on that wall. Again, behind these big buildings, it was just this wall, stone wall. We ended up doing some stuff there because it was like, even though it seemed to be right in the open, we played on those blocks a lot, and we wasn't really worried about if cops was coming through. I guess,
right.
It was like, oh yeah, okay, well, 5-0 come through, someone's gonna yell 5-0 or whatever. So I would say about 3 or 4.
Did you get any flicks of those first few pieces you did?
No, the first few first flicks I started taking of my own stuff, I believe was, I might have had that first Wane, and then somehow I had also a picture somewhere. It's not something I can dig up now, but of the first hem piece I did, which was in the same vein of that at that time. And that first hem piece was in 130. I'm sorry, not 130. Was in 96. That was inside the schoolyard. There was a small
Wait,
space.
96 or 86?
96. I always said PS 96.
Oh, PS. Got you. And what year was that him piece?
That piece was around the same time. I believe it was like late 83, 84.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and that him piece was like, oh, you know, it was there. I think also too somebody crossed it out or they wrote her on it. I remember that.
And I'm gonna, we did this call out, right, to our listeners to get a couple of questions to use. And one of the first ones that I'll bring up is at Suffy Suff, which is the homie Suffer from MTA. Dude kills it. He asked, like, how long were you writing Wayne before you came up with the other two names that you write, or did you write those names before you were Wayne? And so now it sounds like you're saying that you may have done a hymns piece before you did Wayne?
No, I did the Wayne piece first.
Oh, you did?
I did the Wayne piece first, but it was at the same time, because like I said, I was doing the 10-10 wins and playing around with the minnow thing.
Right.
And then I met Blade. And then Blade told me, and then I went home, and I figured out, okay, Wayne, right? And then at the same time, I was still looking in the dictionary, and I came up with him.
Yeah, and what was that all about? Like, what kind of like clicked with you that made you think that would be a good tag?
I wanted a 3-letter name. I was looking at like, okay, men, and then there was other guys, that wrote on the line 3 letters. It just seemed like you could knock it out quick. Gotta get in, gotta get out. Like it just in my head at the time, I was like, oh, I need a 3-letter name. So I looked, and then somehow him stuck, and I like the idea of him again. I like the idea him did it. It was him.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. Yeah, it still is a good tag.
So also too, what I thought of is like this, right? Is also, who was doing really cool 3-letter pieces at that time, killing it? Bio, Tat Screw.
Of course.
There was one of my pieces that people post. It's like a bio with looks like jungle green, clover green, black outline, and I believe there's a panel by itself. And I believe he did a school burst yellow, like border. One of my favorite pieces by him. So I love the 3-letter idea, and these guys, they were killing it with the 3-letter idea, and I wanted to be part of that. So I was like, okay. Also, guys that had 2-letter names, but I couldn't really figure out the 2-letter things. Like okay, they were like BG, and they were like men doing NE, and these sort of guys. On the line. There was a lot of Brooklyn guys doing 2 letters.
Still are actually out here.
Yeah, still are,
And let me just keep on Suffer's question, because he also says, the other name, which we know it's Nose. When did you first do a nose piece?
Nose, I would say 85.
Oh wow.
85. I also dig deep. One thing with the names, or in the beginning, like I said, I tried a lot of names, and then I wanted to kind of have names that, because the one thing about what Blade said was, he said, if you write a name that no one has and you're whack and you're just starting out, or you're writing your own given name and you run into a writer, and you address yourself, at least they respect that you started off on a good foot. Meaning that you kind of respected the culture, and that you wanted to do the right thing. So you kind of, you took time to really think about and pursue something that that you think no one has. And I did my homework, and I talked to some guys, and like I said, I started with Wayne. When I really, of course, 10-10 and Minnow, but really like Wayne, and without the Y, and then him, and then Nose came in 85. I did my first Nose piece, and I believe maybe it was 85, maybe 86.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe it was 86. I'm sorry, it was 86, I believe. And I did my first Nose piece, or should I say Nose, KNOW, before the S, right, with Dero and somebody else, and we did near the kind of projects around Alton Avenue. It's called the Coops, and they had like a handball court area, on Olinville, but heading towards Burke, or like I said before the projects over there, there was a schoolyard with a long handball court, and Dero, and somebody else attempted to do a no piece there. We got chased by cops. We got away though.
Okay.
The fucking cop came and he was like, we were painting, everything was comfortable. At first nervous and then painting. It's the first time I'm doing a blend. I remember I was doing like a pastel yellow into either jungle green or clover green, black outline.
Sick. And
I'm about to start outlining or something. And here's this motherfucker like, freeze, literally. I'm not even bullshit. Freeze, police. And he was on the stupid motherfucker. He was on the other. The thing about this handball court is we were boxed in, right? From the street where he was on our left side.
Oh, like boxed in
by
fences,
he could look down into the handball court.
Okay.
And the fence went all the way around us, and all the way right was the entrance. So we ran for the entrance, and he tried to run in the park and run, but you could tell we were real young, and he was. You could tell, like, because of the gun belt and all his stuff, ain't no way he was going to catch us. The minute we got out that gate, we were ghosts. And I mean, it was dark. Streets was real dark back then. A block or two, you were ghost.
Nice.
There's no way he was gonna catch us.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that was my first to answer the gentleman's question.
Well,
86. I'm going to add one more thing to that.
Uh-huh.
And how later on I became Hims with an S, or even Hims, how Nose became Nose later, is one time I was at Tremont. We used to bench trains at Tremont. Because at the time, that was the spot to be at. People would bench. The bench was actually at 149th Street, Grand Concourse.
Yeah.
But people were taking pictures on Tremont. That's where you would see, like, a lot of people taking pictures. Tad's crew. You'd see even Scene UA out there. A lot of riders. You'd see them out there benching or taking pictures. So I was there one time, benching. And this guy, Too Mean, came. Actually, he got supposedly from the newspapers, and a couple of people gave him shout-outs last year on the gram. He got shot in Brooklyn taking the tag. Like, he was riding on the subways, Too Mean, for years, and then he disappeared for decades. And then I guess he was riding in Brooklyn some years ago, and someone shot him. It was in the newspapers. Anyway, so Too Mean, he was like a big black kid from Mount Vernon. And he came to the bench, and I'm sitting there, maybe Ven's there, Whips is there, a couple other cats. And he was like, "What up, Hims?" And I was like, in my head, I didn't tell him. I was like, in my head, I was like, "Hims, that sounds good." I like the way that rolled. I like the way that rolled off his tongue. Okay. Like, yo, what up? And then I went home. I started playing with the S and added it. And now I'm like, fuck a 2-letter name. But if I show you pictures, which, I don't know, some of the older stuff, there's a lot of archives I got, but I'm waiting for a book. I feel like
you should make a book, man.
Some people always like, oh, you should post more of the older shit. I'm like, really? A lot of people don't really. To me now, there's not so many people that really care about the old shit. So I try not to live in the past. I create new work all the time.
Yeah, that's good.
So
I also think that like it would devalue the work by putting it on Instagram. Like that work deserves to be chronicled in a piece of printed matter.
Exactly, totally, and also with a story behind it.
Exactly.
So to get back to what to my life and letters, if when it comes to that point when I will show people, or if they can look online, they might see some skeletons of these pieces. You could tell that the story, this was 86, because prior to that, any piece I did with the name Him was without the S, without Hims, was 85 and before. You could tell, like, I went on the one line, I did all my pieces in 85. In 86, we stopped writing on the one line. So I did a bunch of him pieces on the one line, and that could date it. Because they were all without an S. That's right. Because later on I did a Hims on the 3s, but that was later. So To answer this question, yeah, I would say, around the same time, Wayne and him, around the same time, and then '86 would be the Nose.
Okay.
And there were some other names during the years that I might have did panels with.
And then, I stopped you earlier from telling that story about the first time you went out with Duro. So let's go back to that now. Because we established now that, '83, you started putting the paint down. You were doing 1010s. Then you did some hymns. You did some no's. Like you said, you met Blade, and he was the one that brought you to this point, said, hey, you can write your name. There's no shame in that. So how did it go down that first night painting with Duro? And was that your first time painting a train?
No. When I painted with Duro was '86 when I did the first no piece. When I did my first train, I painted with Michelob.
I'm sorry, that's what you said. That's right. Okay,
yep.
So tell us that story.
I painted with Michelob. What happened is, because these stories are real long and no one wants to listen. Anyway, I'm trying to speed it up to make you. The thing about Michelob was he was bombing and he was doing his thing. And I was in
tell us
junior
more
high.
about him. I never even heard of him.
Yeah, I'll tell you, like, Michelob was the type of guy who was, well confident within himself and his skills. Let's just say that. Like, he can draw, at this particular time, when we are back in the days, he if you saw his black books, he could draw anything. And you know what? In some photos I'm going to send you, I'm gonna send a picture of a page of one of his black books, because people don't really know who he is unless they were around that time. But he had a lot of ups. He was super confident with his skills and who he was, in a way of like, okay, I'm Michelob, COD is my crew. I do all my pieces in Baychester. He was like, he went to other layups and yards, but Baychester, he was like, yo, I own Baychester. That's my layup. He was like on that shit. You know what I mean? Which back in those days, there was a lot of guys, that was kind of, on that tip. But like, he was like, how I met him. So like I said, he was mostly known for black books, but he also did a bunch of different trains. If people go to the COD Crew 1983 feed, because for years people were, yo, Wayne, show some more old shit. So on that feed on IG, we show old and new COD.
Ah, cool, nice.
So you can see some of the Michelob stuff. We don't put all of, there's some stuff more I have, but we're trying to like save it for like something special. But you'll see on there, some Michelob stuff on there. And then he went to the Marines, I believe, at the end of '84. Okay, he was a couple years. He was years older than me. I finished high school, and he was like, that was it. He was done. He was like, yeah, I'm going to the Marines, and he went to the Marines. When he came back during, every year breaks or whatever, we'd still go painting, and he'd paint a train, and there was more stuff he did. But his career was like, I would say like maybe '82 until like '84, until he went to the Marines, something like that. Okay. He started the crew in '83. Okay. So anyway, I met him. How I met him was I was in junior high school, 135. I'm sitting there at the lunch table, and what they did was lunch. The 7th graders had lunch with the 9th graders, and I'm there. I'm showing black books, kids my age, and blah blah blah, and people yapping, and some people are like, "Oh shit, wait, that shit is cool," and people giving me kind of dap for my black book shit. And this kid Shannon Holmes, I remember. I won't put out his last name there, but I'll tell you why I put out his last name. Shannon Holmes was an older kid that wrote Say, and he was down with COD. He wrote Say, S-A-E. Not much of a writer, but he was more of like a kid who was just into all other sorts of shit on the street. Okay. He passed by the table, and he was like, "Oh, sure, let me see." And we showed him the black book that everybody was giving me dap, and he was like, ain't nothing special about that. And everybody's like, "Oh shit, oh," but he's like this big black kid, so people are like, "Oh well, okay, shh," And what happened was, I was like, "Yeah, what you write?" At that particular time, at that moment, he didn't say. He said, "I write Michelob." That's what he said. Oh, I said, wow. When he did that, I said, "What you write?" He said, I write Michelob. I said, "Oh shit, oh, wow, okay, yeah, I see, yeah, yeah, I see your shit." And then I was like, "Hey man, listen. Hey, can you hit my black book?" Now I know who he is. I'm like, wow, that's Michelob? Okay. So he's like, yeah, sure. So he takes my black book. He said, I'll bring it back tomorrow. Right? Back then, most people would have probably vamped it. But he didn't.
Okay.
He brought it back. And he was like, yo, here you go. And it had a fresh Michelob piece with a character. I said, oh, man, this is amazing, right? But just before that happened, right? So before that happened, he came to the lunch table, like before me and him interacted like that. He came to the lunch table, and the same kids are there, you know, and everybody's like eager to see, right, what he did, because they say, you know, because he said he was Michelob. He opened a black book in a split of a second, and he slammed it. You know, like, you just open it so you could see enough, and then he just said, and he was like, and everybody was like, ooh, you know, and they saw the colors, and everybody was like, wow, you know. And then he gave me the black book, and as he kind of walked away, that's when I ran up, hey, yo, man, that's incredible, man, yo, you know, like, you know, you want to get up, and, you know, and he was like, let me talk to you over here. And he's like, yo, I'm not Michelob. I'm like, what? What the fuck are you talking about? Look at the piece. He's like, nah, man. He's like, yo, I actually write say. He goes, my man is Michelob. He goes, yeah, yo, I can introduce you. Oh, okay. So so we met after school. He takes me up in you know, uptown, because I was like living around Allerton. He takes me up to 223rd Street and Edenmall, where Edenmall Project is, and we went into the projects, and he knocked on the door. Michelob came out, and he was like, yo, you know, he's like, oh shit, nice to meet you, da da da. And
Michelob was older than you at the time?
He was older. He was older. I was like maybe 13, and Michelob had like probably 17, 18, you know? And he was like, oh, come in. And we came into his room, and he had all these black books and markers, and he was doing jackets for like Bambaataa, and, you know, with acrylics. And it blew my mind, you know, and I'm hanging out with him, and, you know, for now until I was like, yo, I gotta go do my homework. And, you know, and he was like, and as me and Shannon left, I remember him saying, yo, push COD. I'm like, COD?
Damn.
He said, yeah, that's my crew. You could push it. You got potential. His word was like, you got potential. I never forgot that he said that. I always remember a few things in the many of years. People tell me, yo, I met you, Wayne. I don't remember everything. But Blade, I remember. And I remember Michelob. He goes, put up COD. You got potential. I said, wow, okay. Now I'm like stuck. Like, can't believe it.
And that's also because he went through your whole book when he was doing that page, right? So he saw your work in the book. Okay.
Yeah. You know, and I mean, the work was garbage, but
hey, you have potential.
Hey. Like he said, he saw something. You got potential. And then a week later, you know, he's like, yo, you know, come on, you want to go out? Let's go painting, you know? You know, we'll go to Baychester. Don't worry about it. I got this shit on lock. You know, like I said, he was super confident with everything he did. He was really like, so yeah, you know, Baychester is my spot. Don't worry about this shit. Like, yo, we go racking. You know, I got the racks, you know. Like, oh, those motherfuckers, I don't give a fuck about them. Like, yo, I take that shit. You know, he was really like, you know, and he, you know, even prior to that, like, we went and the first train we did, and my brother came along, my older brother, who didn't really write, but like I said, back then everybody's trying to fit in. So he came, and we gave him a name, and he wrote Bias.
Your brother, you gave him the name Bias?
Yeah, we gave him, you know, somehow we gave him a name Bias, right? Which later on, there's some trains I did. There's a Bias from Brooklyn that people know, but there's some trains I did on the line for my brother, and there were Bias pieces. Like, I got, you know, actually 1 or 2 good panels, actually. Anyway, back to the story. We went to Baychester, and the train was my brother might have been painting on a different train, but the panel train was a Michelob. I was scared shit, so I did a WE. I didn't even do all my letters.
So your first panel was a WE?
WE, and then we wrote with another original COD member, Rem 311, REM 311, rest in peace, right? And their experience doing their thing. And the thing is, the side I was on the downtown side. We were painting on the outside of Baychester, and it was 2 third rails. You had to kind of stand on the third rails. Now in New York, you can stand on the third rails because it's covered by wood. Now, for all my heads in Chicago, they know you ain't standing on the third rail in Chicago because you're gonna stand on 2 third rails. You're gonna get electrocuted because there's no covers on the rails in Chicago. Okay, that's another story.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm standing. I'm trying to stand on the rails with my legs open, but like I'm too small, so I'm struggling to try to reach the panel. So I'm doing a WE. Michelob is like on the thing. Standing on the third rails to give him leverage, and so is Rem. Anyway, at the same time, when you're in the layup, the trains are making noises. It's like, and every time that happens, you turn your head. Oh shit, someone coming? But it's pitch black. You can't see shit. Okay? There's nothing. You can't see nothing. I mean, it's so dark, you might as well be standing in a room with no lights on and no windows. And you're trying to do a piece. And then the noise. Like I said, the trains at the time, the R22s, those cars, which were painted white at the time, because the MTA had painted them white, where before they were silver with the blue stripe. And like I said, it was like the noise. You're like, oh, fuck. And all that, and the surroundings, like, wasn't ready for it. Anyway, I was able to finish the piece, and they rocked, and we left, and we did good. And I can't remember what my brother did. He either bombed. I remember he didn't do a piece, but he was there. And then, I believe also my man Shannon was there, and who was writing SEY at the time. And then we left, and that was the first time. And then my second time, I went with Nip, and we went to Esplanade with some other cats.
Well, actually, can I stop you there?
Yeah.
Like, I'm really interested in how you felt walking out of the yard that night. You did your first piece on a panel with these OGs or these guys you looked up to. What did it feel like?
Oh, a sense of accomplishment. You're like, oh my God, you can't believe it. You can't believe it. I have been watching trains for so long, what I thought was forever because I was a kid, and then to actually have a train.
Yeah.
I mean, the shit was whack, but I was there.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe that experience. I'm walking out like I felt good. I felt a feeling that I don't feel much these days, but it was definitely a sense of accomplishment. Like, you can't believe it. So we walk out, but it really hits you when you're standing on the train platform the next day. You're standing out there, the sun is bright, you feel good, and out of the blue, a train rolls up, pulling in the station, and there it is, your name.
Dope.
It's on the fucking train. You're like, unbelievable. You can't even believe it. I don't care how many times you do it.
Yeah.
Even if I was to do it today and you see it, the best feeling is when it rolls up. And to speed up a little bit, to just give, a sense of, that again, that feeling is like, okay, now speed up a little bit. A few weeks later, I'm on my third train. I remember I did a train in, I believe, probably Baychester again. Who did I do it with? I think my man Devs or somebody. I think my man Devs. We went and we did, I remember I did a yellow into a hot pink, black outline. Can't remember what the background was. And then what happened is, I'm on Tremont. And I'm standing there. And, now Tremont, like, all these guys are, going to Tremont and, shit's going down and, you gotta be careful, out there, you're like, so I'm standing out there and, I saw some guys, I think it was LM4, maybe Shane, some other dudes. And, so I see them at the bench. So I'm kind of like niching my way over close to kind of hear what they're talking about, cause I'm not really, nobody really knows who the fuck I am. But I kind of know it's them, and I'm like itching over, and got my camera or whatever. And then somebody on the bench says, "What you write, man?" And I was like, "Wayne." And they were like, "Okay," but no one's saying anything. And then one guy goes, yo, you got anything running on the line? And at that point, if people know Tremont, it has this really this turn that's like indented turn from 180. It's like a snake. And I look out on the track. I swear, this is just true story. And I look out, and the train's coming southbound where we were standing on Tremont for 180. And I look, and there was that panel, that third panel I did.
Nice.
And I go, there it is. There it is, right there. That's me. And, yo, it was whack. I can't front, it was whack. But they looked at it, and they were like, they just nodded their head like, okay.
So you had some instant credibility.
He got CZ's up. Mm-hmm. He got something on the line.
Right.
He's there.
Yeah.
He's whack. but he's there. But he's there, you know.
Whack,
like
but he's there.
That was the acknowledgement, because I could tell that was the acknowledgement, because I know if there was something wrong, they would have slapped me up and be like, get the fuck out of here, because that's the way it was. Nobody was holding back then.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they would have been like, get the fuck out of here. You kidding me?
Right.
You know, so they just kind of let me stand there.
And check it, you know, I wanted to ask this earlier, and actually you touched on it at the very top of the interview, because at this point, Subway Art is out, right? And Style Wars has been out. And you know, I gotta ask, since it's of that era, it's a two-part question actually. What was the effect of both of those pieces of media on you? And then at Nate1Design asked on the Instagram page for you to name your top 5 writers that they left out of either Subway Art or from Star Wars. And by the way, in case you don't know, Nate1Design, that's Nate from MPC in California, very influential 80s writer, so I want to give him his respect right there. But
no doubt.
Can you answer that two-part question?
So you say the first part was what again?
Yeah, like what was the effect
that
book and movie had on you?
You know, it's funny because a lot of people around the world, they say, you know, they're like, oh, that was the Bible, that was it.
Yeah, for those of us who weren't in New York, it was, right? So so I'm very curious to hear about your opinion.
Totally, and I get that. And I think, but even being here and being so immersed in it already, because it's all around us, whether you were doing it or not,
right?
It was still the shit. It was still the shit.
Nice. Cool.
You know, it was like amazing. But what happened was, when and it had a big effect obviously on everyone. I think now it's just that those guys that were in that movie or that book, you kind of really looking up to them more. But they were already what we call, you know, hood famous, or they just had street cred. They were ready. As people looked at them from Subway Art, they were looking at these dudes like that already. They had already built a street cred for years, some of these dudes. I mean, you know, when you're talking like, you know, guys like Scheme, and you're talking about, even Poem and Rolly and all these guys in that book, T-Kid, people were already like, just amazing level of talent and skill. Mm-hmm. There had been, you know, the word. And back then, your Instagram was the whole social media thing was like word of mouth.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna say that word of mouth was, they already had achieved that. Mm-hmm. It's just that now it was in printed matter, you know, or they were in a movie, and it was certified. But people like us, we already looked at them as on that level. Now, to answer the question, who are the top 5?
That they left out. Yeah.
They left out. Okay. For Subway Art, that's very hard to say, because there's so many people in that. That question for Subway Art, I can't really answer. But for Star Wars, I would say, and you know, people don't quote me because I could be wrong. They could have been in there. Bear 167, TDS. I'm gonna go better than 5. Fuzz, okay, TAC FBA, okay, Phase 2, because I don't remember these guys in Star Wars. Mm-hmm. Subway Art,
yeah, of course,
probably, but Star Wars, I don't remember them. In Star Wars, I don't remember. I think they had a quick one, a flash of Blade, but really, I would say in Star Wars, I'm gonna just list a bunch of guys. I'd say top 5 would be like Bear 167, TAC FBA, Fuzz, Part, and Phase 2.
I mean, there it is. There it is, you know. And listen, man, I don't know where to stop this interview, because I got to tell you one thing. This has been, like, for me, I think the bar has been raised now for our podcast. This is the new bar, and this has been like so illuminating, dude. Like, my head is kind of,
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I hope you know, everybody tuning in, you know, they can get a grasp on what I'm saying. I mean, the names are so far-fetched, because some people, I mean, I'm talking, you know, obviously these guys can go back even further, but I'm talking from my experience.
Yeah, dude.
And, you know,
and I'll tell you,
it's been
man,
30, 40 years, so I don't even know.
Yeah,
sometimes
man.
you stand around guys and people talk, you're like, what's he talking about?
Yeah, well,
you know,
I mean, the great
like,
thing about a podcast is they can pause, go Google, and come back and get that answer, you know?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, I think people are thirsty for this, you know? And that's just been what we've been seeing, the response we've been getting for this documentation we're making. People want more, and they want a lot more. And so, you know, I gotta thank you again, man. Like, we went over time, but you've been real generous, and the stories are just like amazing. Let people know, because we're actually excited that our listening base is not just graph heads. So can you tell people where we can find your work? Because I know you're on Instagram, but let us know some of your other channels. If you have a site, if you have a Facebook, whatever, where can we find you?
Yeah, Wane COD on IG,
and that's one word, WANEONECOD, right?
Right, but there you can find me. I also have a website now.
Great.
Wane1.com.
Listen, man, again, can't thank you enough for taking the time. This has been great. And then let's put it on record. We're gonna get together maybe in 6 months or so and do a part 2, because everyone's they're all gonna hit me up, homie. They're gonna be like, yo, you stopped in 86. What the fuck? There's so much more. And I know it. And so
look, I'm just happy that people would even listen, you know. And I think, like I said, you know, thank you to you for doing the podcast. You know, just do this stuff, you know, document ourselves accurately from a writer's perspective, from the ones that live it. And, hey, I'll be happy to come back and do some more. I tell you, I mean, if people are happy with what we talked about, I'll be happy to come back.
They will.
You know, but if they don't want to hear me talk, then I'll just keep paying them. 'Cause that's what I do.
All right, man. Well, that's it. Thank you, man.
No, thanks again.
Okay.
I appreciate it, and hope to get up with you personally.
It'll happen.